Anniversaries are supposed to mean something. Or at least that's what I always believed. Not just another dinner out, not another routine celebration where you go through the motions, but something real. Something that reflects who we are, what we've built. 6 years of memories, growing pains, inside jokes, and little triumphs. So when Mallory said she had something special planned this year, I was hopeful. Not the over-the-moon kind of hopeful, just the quiet, maybe she actually thought this through hopeful. But that night told me more than I was ready to admit. The venue was a trendy art bar in Williamsburg. Kind of industrial, with those wireframe light bulbs hanging from the ceiling and weird paint splatter art on every wall. It was loud, full of people who wore their personalities in their haircuts and eyeglass frames. It was very, not us. Don't get me wrong, Mallory's always been the artsy one. She used to drag me to gallery openings and live poetry readings when we first started dating. I didn't mind. It was part of her charm. But for our anniversary? It just didn't feel like something we would do. It felt like something she wanted to do. When we walked in, I expected to see a few familiar faces, my brother, maybe my best friend Drew and his wife, or even a couple of mutual friends. But instead, I recognized almost no one. She'd invited her co-workers from the marketing firm, the ones I'd only heard about through stories, and a few of her artist friends I'd maybe met once in passing. That should have been my first red flag. I smiled through it though. Tried to roll with it. After all, she was beaming. She looked beautiful that night, red dress, curled hair, silver earrings I bought her last Christmas. And I told myself maybe she just wanted to show me off to her circle. Maybe it was her way of including me in her world. But then came Charlie. Tall, scruffy in that perfectly maintained kind of way. Dark jacket, easy laugh. Confident. Mid-30s, probably. I pegged him immediately as someone who knew he had a certain effect on people, especially women. Mallory lit up when he walked in. He made his way to our table like he belonged there. She stood up to hug him. Not one of those side hugs you give someone you kind of know. A full embrace, close, long, in asterisk mate. Her hand on his back. His on her waist. Charlie, she said, her voice higher than usual. I was starting to think you'd ditch us. Us. They exchanged this look like they'd already been talking all day, and then she leaned in when he whispered something in her ear. She laughed. Full-bodied, eye-squinted kind of laugh. The kind that's genuine, not polite. And then she squeezed his hand. That's when my stomach tightened. Not jealousy, more like disorientation. I suddenly felt like a guest at someone else's party. Like I had walked into the wrong narrative and everyone else had already read the script. I watched them, trying not to overreact. But it felt off. Too familiar. Too warm. They sat next to each other. She poured his drink before offering me one. They shared little side jokes, leaned in close to talk over the music, and when dessert came out, some ridiculous abstract sculpture of chocolate mousse with a lit sparkler, Mallory stood up with her glass, turned to the table, and said, "To Charlie for pulling this whole night together. Honestly, he's the real gift this year." She raised her glass. Everyone laughed and toasted. Charlie did that humble shrug like, "Ah, come on." But he didn't protest too hard. I stared at her. Did she just say that? In front of everyone? The real gift this year? Her eyes caught mine. For a split second, I swear she knew what she'd done. But then her smile turned playful and exaggerated. "Oh, don't look at me like that," she said, laughing. "You know I'm kidding. Charlie just helped me book the venue and wrangle people. Don't make it weird, babe." Everyone laughed again. Even Charlie. Even Drew, who gave me this quick side glance like, "You okay, man?" And I did what I always do, I smiled. I laughed. I played along. Because what else was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Demand a do-over? Mallory leaned in, kissed me on the cheek, and clinked her glass against mine. "To 6 years," she said, looking at me like nothing had happened. Like everything was perfectly fine. "To 6 years," I echoed. But my voice was hollow. I don't even remember what dessert tasted like. Or what music played next. I just remember sitting there, looking around the table, wondering when I had become the outsider in my own relationship. Everyone seemed to be in on something that I wasn't. And Mallory, she was leading the charge. Laughing, glowing, holding court like it was her night, her people, her life. And me? I was just the guy sitting next to Charlie. I drove us home in silence. She talked the whole way about how fun it was, how great the turnout had been, how much everyone loved the place. I nodded, threw in a few yes and totallys, but my mind was elsewhere. Replaying the night. Rewinding certain looks, certain laughs, that toast. Was I crazy? Was I overthinking? Or had I just watched my wife publicly raise a glass to the man she was falling for? We got home. She kicked off her heels, poured herself some wine, and disappeared into the bathroom, humming. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. Something had shifted. And I knew deep in my gut that this wasn't just one weird moment. This was the beginning of the unraveling. The night after the dinner, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Mallory asleep next to me like nothing had happened. Her breath was steady, soft. She looked peaceful. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the toast in my head, the real gift this year. I wanted to believe it was a joke. I really did. That maybe I'd been tired or too sensitive or too insecure. But that voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, you saw it. You felt it. Don't lie to yourself. I turned my head, looked at her in the faint moonlight coming through the blinds. She shifted slightly, mumbling something incoherent, then rolled over, her back to me. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I made us coffee. I sat at the kitchen island while she scrolled through her phone like always, half listening as I talked about work, nodding, smiling. It was the same routine, but it didn't feel the same. I wasn't just watching her anymore. I was observing her. And once I started doing that, things began to fall into place. It wasn't just the toast. It wasn't just Charlie. It was everything. The late gym nights. The sudden burst of interest in fitness, but never wanting me to come along. I'd offer to drive her, to spot her, she'd always smile and say, I need this time for myself. It helps me decompress. And her phone. God, the way she started leaving it face down all the time. Even when it buzzed, she wouldn't look at it around me. Once it lit up with a message while she was in the shower. I didn't look at it, but I saw the name, See, Charlie? The gym bag. That one stuck with me. One night, maybe a month ago, she came home from the gym, late, hair slightly damp, like she'd just showered, but there was perfume. A scent I'd never smelled before. Sweet, unfamiliar. Not hers. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, said one of the women at the gym must have sprayed something in the locker room. People practically bathe in body spray these days, she joked. And I let it go. God, I let so many things go. Another time she had her headphones in, smiling at something. I asked what podcast it was. Oh, she said casually, it's one of those true crime ones you hate. You'd be bored out of your mind. Then she turned the volume down. But I heard a man's voice. Not narration, conversation. Laughter. A voice calling her babe. I remember standing in the doorway watching her fake that laugh. A second later, she noticed me and quickly pulled the headphones out. What's up? She asked, like nothing had happened. And I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked away. I didn't want to believe it then. That was the truth. I didn't want to face what my gut had already figured out. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt, telling myself I was paranoid, insecure, controlling anything to avoid the truth. But after that dinner, the denial started to fall apart. It didn't happen all at once. It was like water dripping through a crack in the ceiling, slow but unstoppable. I started rewinding, scanning back through the last few months like a crime scene investigator, trying to find the first moment things stopped feeling right. There was a weekend she said she was visiting her sister in Beacon. I remember offering to come along. She laughed it off, said it was girls only. Spa weekend, wine, sister stuff. She posted a few vague photos to her story, mountains, a wine glass, a blurry selfie. But now I wonder, who took that picture? It wasn't her sister. The angle, the lighting, it was too curated. And the way she smiled, it was the same smile she gave Charlie at the art bar. Relaxed. Flushed. Not the smile you give when you're catching up with family. There were other trips. Networking events. Team dinners. Always vague, always last minute. The kind of plans that popped up out of nowhere and left no trail. Once she left her laptop open. I wasn't snooping, not really. But her inbox was open and I saw an invitation, a hotel booking confirmation. She'd told me she was staying with a friend that night. Said they were watching movies and drinking wine. But the reservation said 1 king bed, 1 adult. Downtown Manhattan. I didn't say anything. I closed the laptop. Pretended I hadn't seen it. I told myself it could have been a mistake. I've spent the last few weeks gaslighting myself. Telling myself I was crazy or jealous or imagining things. But when I line them all up one after the other, it's a straight line. A pattern. The dots connect too easily. The look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. The way her smile dropped the second she turned away from me. The excuses that used to make sense but now felt manufactured. Polished. Even the way she touched me started to change. Less spontaneous. Less affectionate. Like she was going through the motions, keeping up the illusion. I didn't want to believe I was the kind of guy who didn't know his wife anymore. But here I was. I knew. I knew before I had proof. But that's the worst part, isn't it? Knowing but not knowing enough to do anything about it. Not yet. Because there's still that part of your brain that wants to be wrong. That begs you to be wrong. That says maybe it's a midlife crisis. Maybe she's just distant. Maybe she's not cheating, maybe you're broken. But that voice was dying. Slowly. Quietly. And another voice was getting louder. The one that whispered, she's been lying to you. Over and over again. I started watching her even more closely. Not accusing, just collecting. I didn't ask questions I used to ask. I didn't offer to tag along anymore. I let her live in whatever story she was crafting, all while mentally bookmarking the inconsistencies. I told myself I wasn't going to confront her until I had something concrete. Not because I needed to win, but because I knew she was the kind of person who could twist a half-truth into a full apology. The kind who could turn an accusation into an attack on me. She was careful. I'll give her that. Mallory didn't leave lipstick on collars or perfume on receipts. She left just enough breadcrumbs to make me feel crazy. But now I wasn't just following the crumbs. I was mapping them. And once I started seeing the full picture, I couldn't unsee it. It happened the next morning. Mallory said she was heading to Jersey to see her mom. She's been feeling a little off lately, she explained, slipping on that oversized cream-colored sweater she always wore when she wanted to appear cozy and harmless. Probably just stress. I nodded from behind my coffee mug, watching her move around the kitchen like nothing had shifted, like our whole marriage wasn't quietly bleeding out in the corner. I knew she wasn't going to Jersey. But I didn't stop her. I kissed her on the cheek, told her to drive safe, and watched her walk out the door with her duffel bag and that annoying sense of ease in her step. 30 minutes later, I sat on the couch with the family tablet in my hands. She'd forgotten it was still linked to her messages. We used it mostly for streaming or following recipes in the kitchen, but her Apple account was still synced. I hadn't looked before because I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband. The snooper. The one who violated trust to protect his own fear. But that morning I didn't feel like a husband anymore. I felt like a man trying to survive his own story. And there it was, her messages, lighting up like a Christmas tree. First one. Charlie, I miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night. I stared at it, unblinking. The timestamp? 10 minutes ago. Then her reply came in. Mallory, me too. Same room tomorrow. I felt it like a punch. No dramatic sound effect, no shattering glass, just this deep, pulsing numbness spreading through my chest. Like my entire nervous system just gave up trying to warn me. Same room. Tomorrow. So this wasn't new. This wasn't some mistake or moment of weakness. This was routine. Pre-planned. An itinerary of betrayal. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until my chest started to ache. I set the tablet down, stood up, paced the living room in a tight, repetitive loop. My hands were trembling. Not from rage or rage I could have handled. This was something colder. Like grief. But worse. Because grief comes after loss. This was still happening. Still present. I went back to the tablet, scrolled further. More messages buried a few weeks deep. Casual at first. A meme here. An ugh, long day there. And then things started to slip, the late-night confessions, the inside jokes I'd never heard, the little "wish I was with you" texts sent while she was supposedly at a work dinner. One message stood out, dated 2 months ago. The same weekend she'd told me she was staying at her friend Lara's place after a girls' movie night. Charlie, your back looked incredible under that hotel lighting. Hope you brought that dress home for your husband. I closed the tablet, stomach turning. That was the night I texted her around midnight, asking if everything was okay because I hadn't heard from her in hours. She replied, totally fine. We're just deep in snacks and bad rom-coms. Love you. She sent that text while she was in bed with someone else. I sat there for a long time, not even blinking. Not crying. I thought I would. But instead, I felt this strange, quiet detachment. Like I was watching it all unfold from behind soundproof glass. Like it wasn't even about me anymore, it was just a story being told, and I was the last to hear it. And then, out of nowhere, the fog cleared. This wasn't about maybe anymore. It wasn't about intuition or suspicion or patterns. I had proof. Hard, time-stamped, digital truth. She was cheating. She had been cheating. And she had been lying with the kind of confidence you don't learn overnight. There was no explanation coming that would make this okay. No mental gymnastics she could perform that would unravel what I had just seen. She had chosen this. Over and over again. And the man I had been, the one who gave her the benefit of the doubt, who laughed at her jokes and kissed her on the cheek before she walked out the door, died quietly on that couch. He deserved better. I deserved better. I didn't throw anything. Didn't scream. I just stood up, walked into her bedroom, and opened her closet. I looked at her stuff, her sweaters, her jewelry boxes, her travel-sized perfume bottles. Everything neatly arranged. A perfect little life built on top of a minefield. I thought about the anniversaries, the vacations, the Tuesday night takeout on the couch. I thought about the time she cried in my arms when her dad passed and how I held her like the world was ending. She used to call me her safe place. Funny. Now I realized I had just been her cover. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew what wasn't happening. I wasn't going to confront her without a plan. I wasn't going to scream and fall into the trap of emotional damage control where she'd twist it, apologize, manipulate, and cry. No, not this time. This time I would lead. With silence. With preparation. With the truth written in her own words. Let her explain same room tomorrow to her mother. Let her explain incredible under hotel lighting to her coworkers. Let her explain to herself how this happened by accident. The game was over. I knew everything. And there was no room left for excuses. Something strange happens when you finally know. When the guessing game ends and you're no longer pacing in the fog of what if, your brain shifts. It stops flinching, stops chasing hope like a kick dog, and starts calculating. I wasn't heartbroken in the way movies show it. There was no sobbing on the bathroom floor. No whiskey-fueled breakdown. Just a cold clarity that sat in my chest like a brick. Mallory was cheating. With Charlie. And she wasn't even trying to hide it, not really. She was hiding it from the man she assumed wouldn't look. The man who always trusted her. That version of me was gone now. I spent that entire afternoon alone in the apartment, the city humming softly outside our windows like nothing had changed. But everything had. I walked through our space like I was looking at a crime scene. My marriage was dead, it just hadn't been declared yet. Instead of confronting her, I started gathering. First, I went back to the tablet. I didn't just read the messages, I ***ed them. Every single one. Dozens. I synced them to my laptop and organized them by date, labeling each file. I didn't even hesitate. My hands moved fast, steady. When I was done, I opened her laptop. She always left it on the dining table, thinking I had no reason to touch it. Her browser autofilled everything. I opened her email and typed Charlie into the search bar. Hits everywhere. There were hotel confirmations going back 3 months. Boutique places mostly scattered around the city, Soho, Tribeca, even Brooklyn Heights. Never the same place twice. Like they thought switching locations would somehow clean their conscience. One of the reservations was from the same weekend she told me she was visiting her cousin in Connecticut. I cross-checked the dates with our bank statements. That was the next gold mine. Lingerie boutiques I'd never heard of. A 3-digit charge at a cocktail bar we'd never been to together. Ubers at 1:17 a.m. headed from downtown to an address in Long Island City, an area we had no ties to. I mapped it all out. I built a timeline. It wasn't about jealousy anymore, it was about accuracy. I wanted to understand the depth of the deception, the breadth of her second life. Every email, every dollar, every digital footprint. It was all there. I opened a blank document and titled it Mallory Truth. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, expenses, messages, photos. I formatted it like a case file. Because in a way, it was. I wasn't just a hurt husband, I was building evidence. She had spun a story. And now I was writing the real one. At one point, I opened our shared calendar on her phone. She always invited me to events so I wouldn't double book us. I checked the past few months. There it was, coded language that now made sense. Team late dinner. Client mixer. Gym catch up with Nat. Sleepover at Lara's. All lies. I scrolled back, noting each entry and matching it with message **TS and charges. When it all lined up, the weight of it hit me again. Not emotionally, logistically. The effort she had put into this was stunning. She hadn't stumbled. She had planned. It made me wonder how many lies had gone unrecorded. How many fake smiles. How many moments where I touched her hand, not knowing who had held it just hours earlier. I didn't let myself spiral. Instead, I started pulling files into a folder titled simply, Exit. I backed everything up on a flash drive and emailed copies to myself using a discrete burner email. Then I created a second document, this one for my lawyer. I hadn't called one yet, but I knew I would. I needed to be ready. I had always thought people who prepared like this were cold, calculating. But now I saw it differently. I wasn't preparing revenge. I was protecting my dignity. When the time came, I wanted Mallory to see exactly what I knew. I wanted her to sit across from the truth without the shield of gaslighting, without the reflex to twist words or play the victim. I wasn't going to give her that power. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. Not Drew, not my brother, not even my dad. I wanted to handle this quietly, deliberately. If this was going to blow up, it was going to be on my terms. That night, Mallory came home around 9:15 p.m. She smelled like fresh air and citrus shampoo, like she'd just come from somewhere that wasn't her mom's. She walked in like it was any other Tuesday, dropped her bag, took off her coat, and kissed my cheek from behind as I sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through sports highlights. "Missed you," she said casually. I didn't flinch. "How's your mom?" "Oh, she's okay," she said, kicking off her boots. "We watched old movies and talked about stupid stuff. It was nice." I smiled without looking up. "That's good." She had no idea I already knew she hadn't even left the city. She didn't know I'd already printed the email confirmation for the Soho hotel room she'd stayed in the night before, or that I had screenshot TS of her midnight conversations with Charlie. She poured herself a glass of wine and joined me on the couch. I could feel her eyes on me, maybe sensing something had shifted. But I didn't give her anything. The next few days passed in slow motion. I kept gathering. A text here, a receipt there. I even found a Lyft ride she took during book club night that ended just blocks away from Charlie's apartment. She was thorough, but not invincible. And I had time. My patience scared me, to be honest. The fact that I could sit next to her, knowing what I knew, and say nothing. It was almost sociopathic. But I think that's what betrayal does, it numbs you in stages. I wasn't doing this for drama. I was doing it for truth. And when I finally showed her what I had, it would be undeniable. By the end of that week, the evidence was airtight. I had compiled everything into a single folder, digital and physical. Screenshot TS, emails, receipts, location history, and even call logs. I didn't just want enough to confront her. I wanted enough that she couldn't spin her way out of it. No room for improvisation. No gaslighting. I had spoken to a lawyer by then. Quietly, privately. Just an initial consultation done over the phone while I sat in my car outside a CVS. I told her the basics, and she was blunt. "You're not the first husband I've talked to about something like this," she said. "But if what you're telling me is true, you need more than screenshot TS. You need context. Dates, repetition, behavior. You need to demonstrate intent." "I have it," I told her. "I just need to finish collecting." "Good," she said. "When you're ready to move, you move once. With everything." That advice stuck. So I kept watching Mallory more closely now. I wasn't acting anymore, I was studying. The way she unlocked her phone under the table. The short bursts of typing and smiling she thought I didn't see. The rushed showers after she got home late. The quick Target run that lasted 2 hours and ended with no bags. I didn't call her out. I just made notes. One night, she texted me from work, said she was having dinner with Nina from HR. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. She was expecting the usual follow-up questions. "Where? What time will you be home? Do you want me to pick you up?" But I was done pretending I didn't know. Instead, I waited. Then followed. Her Uber left from her office and headed downtown. I gave it a 10-minute head start before grabbing my keys and taking the train. I didn't want to risk her spotting the car. It was a Thursday. Cold. The streets glowed wet under the city lights. I felt like a character in someone else's film, some noir detective story, only the betrayal wasn't stylized. It was personal. I followed her to a small boutique hotel tucked behind a sushi place on a quiet block in Tribeca. I watched from across the street. She got out of the car in that black wool coat I bought her last winter. Her hair was curled just enough to look like she didn't try. She paused at the door, checked her phone, smiled slightly. Then walked inside. I didn't need to see Charlie. I didn't need to watch what happened upstairs. I had seen enough. I took photos, her stepping out of the car, walking up the steps, disappearing through the lobby doors. I made sure the timestamp was clear. Then I turned and walked 3 blocks to a FedEx print shop and printed out the chat logs and hotel confirmations I already had. I slipped them into a plain white envelope. Back home, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't scream into the empty apartment. I just sat at the kitchen table and read through the messages one last time. This wasn't denial anymore. This was documentation. By morning, I had a plan. I woke up early, just before sunrise. Quiet. Focused. I made coffee like I always do, 2 cups, hers a little milk, no sugar. I fried eggs, toasted bread, and laid everything out like it was any other Friday morning. The envelope sat in the center of the table next to her coffee cup. She came down in her robe, sleepy-eyed and barefoot, smiling that rehearsed smile she wore like makeup. "Morning," she said, yawning. "Something smells good." I smiled back. "It's all yours," I said, nodding to her seat. She paused. Her eyes landed on the envelope. She tilted her head slightly. "What's this?" I didn't answer. She sat down, coffee in one hand, envelope in the other. The moment she opened it, I watched the shift. You know that look when someone realizes they've been seen? That flicker of fear right before panic kicks in? That was the moment. She pulled out the first page screenshot *TS. Then more. Emails. Printouts of receipts, hotel bookings, message logs, all organized and clipped together neatly. I'd even highlighted some of the messages. Not to be dramatic, just for clarity. She didn't speak. Her breath caught somewhere between denial and defense. I think she flipped through it all expecting to find some weak spot in the evidence, something she could challenge, twist, deny. But there was nothing. Everything was there. She started, her voice already cracked. Mark, I shook my head. Don't. No, please, she said quickly, panic rising. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain. Mallory, I said evenly, you don't have to. Her face flushed, hands trembling slightly. She looked around the kitchen like she was trying to orient herself in the place she'd lived for years, but everything had shifted now. She couldn't find the ground beneath her anymore. Can we just talk? Please. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I stayed quiet. She opened her mouth again, searching for the right excuse, the right tone, the right words. But every sentence started to die halfway out. Her eyes darted to mine, desperate for any signal of forgiveness. There was none. Why didn't you say anything, she asked softly, like she couldn't believe I had held all this inside. Because you would have lied, I said simply. You already were. She didn't deny it. She just sat there, folded in on herself. This isn't me, she whispered. This isn't who I am. I laughed once, quietly. You said that after the first lie, I said. And the second. And the third. I guess at some point it becomes exactly who you are. Her expression collapsed. It wasn't shame. It was fear. Fear of exposure. Of consequences. Of losing control of the narrative. She reached for my hand across the table, but I didn't move. She blinked away tears. Please. Just tell me what you want. We can fix this. We can. We can't, I said. And I meant it. Mallory just sat there. She tried once, just once, to hold eye contact. But it was like staring into a mirror that finally cracked. The pieces were still there, technically whole, but the image was fractured. I can explain, she said softly. But it wasn't her usual soft, her voice wasn't sweet or calming. It was raw. Unscripted. Like even she didn't believe herself anymore. I didn't respond. I just sat across from her with my coffee, watching her squirm in her own skin. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. Charlie, he wasn't supposed to be. I don't even know what to call it. I didn't mean for it to become real. Didn't mean for it to become real, I repeated. You said that to him too. Page 4. Her lips parted. She looked at the envelope again, like it might offer some kind of mercy if she read it differently the second time. I saw the panic start to bloom. Not guilt, not sorrow, but fear. Because for the first time since this started, she couldn't twist her way out of it. There was no way to soften the truth, no emotional appeal that could reframe what she'd done. You think you can just walk away from 6 years? She asked suddenly, a flicker of defiance slipping through. I raised an eyebrow. You walked away months ago. You just didn't tell me. She blinked rapidly. Her throat moved like she was swallowing something sharp. Maybe pride. Maybe regret. But it didn't land the way she thought it would. She shifted in her seat like she couldn't sit still inside her own body. I wasn't happy, Mark, she said finally, her voice louder now, desperate. You've been so distant lately. Work, life, everything. I felt invisible. No, I said calmly. You didn't feel invisible. You felt bored. So you went looking for something exciting. Someone who made you feel wanted without having to do the work of telling me you needed more. That's not fair, she *T back, tears now sliding freely down her face. You don't know how lonely I felt. You know what's not fair? I said, voice still flat. Trusting someone completely and realizing they've been living a second life right beside you. That they kissed you in the morning and someone else at night. That's not fair. She put her head in her hands, sobbing quietly. I didn't reach for her. Let her sit in it. Because this wasn't a moment she could cry her way out of. There were no speeches that could erase the way she looked at him. Or the messages she sent while I was making dinner. Or the hotel rooms she booked when she told me she was taking a night for self-care. That wasn't invisible. That was cruel. And now she finally saw it. Not from my words. From the folder. From the truth. When the silence settled again, I stood up. She looked up at me, eyes wide, like she was afraid of what I'd say next. But I didn't say anything. I walked to the hall closet, pulled out the duffel bag I'd packed the night before, and slung it over my shoulder. You're leaving? She whispered. I nodded once. I have nothing more to say. Mark, please? No. But we need to talk. No, I said again. You needed to talk months ago. You needed to say something when it could have mattered. You chose not to. I walked past her to the door. She didn't follow. She didn't try to block me or scream or throw herself into one of those movie-ending monologues. She just sat there at the table, our kitchen table, surrounded by the pieces of her own deception. And she finally knew she couldn't talk her way out of this one. Not this time. The air outside felt different. Not like freedom, exactly. More like stepping out of a burning house and realizing you can finally breathe. My legs moved on autopilot. Down the steps, across the sidewalk, toward the subway. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Her name on the screen. I didn't answer. Buzz. Another message. You misunderstood. Come back. We need to talk. I deleted it. The lie wasn't just in the cheating. It was in the way she tried to own the narrative even as it burned down around her. And now that she couldn't control the truth, she was desperate to make noise. But I was done listening. She thought silence would be my punishment. But it was my power. Because when someone's entire P*N is manipulation, the most devastating thing you can do is walk away without giving them a single word to fight against.